Hey folks, David here. Welcome to Northern Ireland. You guys know Tabitha's family is from County Armagh here in Northern Ireland, so we're back visiting some family. Since we're here on the island close to St. Patrick's Day, I thought it would be a really great opportunity to show you guys how to play the Irish jig picking pattern. Let me see if I can show you what I mean here. I actually started out playing music in an Irish band before ever starting to play bluegrass, and when I was playing Irish jigs in the past, I didn't know any better but just to use the alternate picking that we use for all sorts of other tunes in 4/4 time. But it wasn't until meeting folks like Marla Fibish and Tim Connell, getting to hang out with them and work with them on music, that I realized it's not the best way to communicate the rhythm of this particular subgenre of fiddle tune music. Wow, the weather here is crazy. I think there's actually a few drops of snow falling right now. So in this video, I want to break this concept down for you. I want to show you why the alternate picking isn't the best option for this, show you how to adopt this new picking pattern and get you started on your very first Irish jig. So whenever you're ready, grab your mandolin and let's check this out together. It's cold out here. Well, I bet some of you guys recognize this spot, right? It's good to be back. Well, before going any further, if there's any skeptics out there who don't want to adopt a whole new picking pattern for the right hand just to play Irish jigs, let me show you what that tune I was playing earlier sounds like with alternate picking versus the jig picking pattern that I was using. So here's alternate picking to start with. Versus that jig picking pattern. So let me just show you what that pattern is. It's just down, up, down, down, up, down. And I just think it makes a world of difference to make the tune sound more rhythmically exciting and more danceable. It just makes the tune come to life in new ways just by changing your pattern like this. And I know this feels really strange at first, but let me explain to you why we do this, because there's a really good reason. First, if there's anyone new to Irish music, let's just start off by talking about what an Irish jig actually is. And kind of the most identifiable quality of these tunes is that they're all played in 6/8 time. So Irish reels, hornpipes, barn dances, and bluegrass fiddle tunes, they're usually all played in 4/4 time, where there's 4 beats in the measure. And there's 8/8 notes in the measure. If you think about it, 4 quarters, 8/8, it kind of makes sense, right? And when we play those types of tunes, we are going to be alternating our pick. It sounds like this, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We do this to make sure our downstrokes line up with the numbered beats in the measure here in 4/4, because those numbered beats are the strongest parts of the measure, and we want to use gravity to help make those beats a little bit stronger, a little bit more emphasized. And by the way, if that's a new concept for you, you should start there first, and I made a whole other lesson video on this topic that you can find up here in the cards above. But back in 6/8 time for these jigs, right? These jigs are usually played pretty quick, and we don't have time to count 6 individual beats, one for each 8th note that we play. So instead, what we usually do is lump them into 2 groups of 3/8 notes, and we emphasize the first out of each group so that there's 2 bigger beats within the measure. So it would be like strong, weak, weak, strong, weak, weak, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can really feel this if you've ever listened to Irish music live. That's where everyone in the crowd taps their foot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, tap. Tap. But herein lies the rub, right? Because if we stick to our alternating pattern like we did for 4/4 time, we're going to be stuck with an upstroke on the 4th/8th note in the measure, which is where that second strong beat is. Instead, we're going to be placing our stronger downstrokes on the 3rd note in the measure and on the 5th note of the measure, which is going to make this music feel kind of wonky. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've come full circle now back to that jig picking pattern, and let's see how this new pattern lines up with those stronger beats in the measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Really big difference, right? And that's a great place to start with this pattern. You know, just grab your open D string and see if you can play through that 6/8 measure again and again, trying to add a little extra emphasis to that first and the fourth note of the measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Strong, strong. And once you're kind of comfortable doing this pattern over an open string, a good next step to take is to play this pattern over a major scale, for instance. So let's take our D major scale and see if we can play one measure of this pattern per note on that scale. So it would sound like this. One measure on your D, 2nd fret, 4th fret, 5th fret, open A, 2nd fret, 4th fret, 5th fret. And don't be frustrated with yourself if this doesn't come automatically. When I was making that shift from the alternate picking to the jig picking pattern, it took me a good couple weeks to even be remotely comfortable playing exercises like this, much less, you know, relearning all the tunes that I had played alternate style with this new pattern. So just take your time. It's almost like a huge brain shift you have to make. But the next challenge comes whenever we start playing different rhythms with this pattern, because not all jigs are just constant 8th notes, right? Some have quarter notes or dotted quarter notes or tied rhythms, and we have to figure out what to do with our right hand to maintain the emphasis in the right places in the measure. So let me show you a couple different exercises here with some different rhythms that you might encounter in real jigs, starting with this first excerpt here. And in this exercise, we have a quarter note at the beginning of the measure, followed by 4 8th notes. So here we have long, short, 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 right? And the way my brain kind of processes this is thinking about each measure in 6/8 time having basically 6 opportunities for our pick strokes, right? And it's the same pattern that we just learned, down, up, down, down, up, down. And when we encounter different rhythms like this, I just think about what pick stroke am I leaving out of the pattern. And for this excerpt, we have a long note at the very beginning of the measure. So basically, I'm leaving out the second pick stroke in my pattern, and I'm resuming with whatever pick stroke comes next, which in this case would be a downstroke, right? Down, 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 up, down, 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 up, down. Even though we're technically leaving out that first upstroke in our pattern here, we're still moving our pick up away from the strings to set up for the next downstroke. So we're still maintaining this pattern no matter what rhythms that we encounter. And that's the real trick to figuring out all these different rhythms. And by the way, for all these written examples you see on screen, you'll see the pick directions in between the tablature and the standard notation. So just use that as a reference if you get lost. So let's check out a slight variation here where we add the quarter note on the second strong beat in the measure. In other words, we're playing 3 8th notes followed by a quarter note and an 8th note. Short, 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 long, short. Sounds like this. Down, up, down, 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 up, down, down, down. All right, here's another one. In this excerpt, we have 6 8th notes, but there's a tie connecting the 3rd and the 4th note in our measure together. Would sound like this. Down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down. So that one's kind of tricky, right? But let's try an easier one here. What if we have a dotted quarter note at the beginning of the measure followed by 3 8th notes? So that dotted quarter is going to take up the first 3 pick opportunities that we have in the measure. So we're just going to be playing a downstroke here followed by down, up, down to finish out the measure. Down, down, up, down, 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 up, down. And you might notice here that I'm kind of miming the pattern away from the strings on those longer notes. That way I can keep my right hand kind of locked into this pattern and play a bit more in time and with a bit more groove. All right, one more. What if we had quarter note followed by 8th note, followed by another quarter note and 8th note pair? So for this one, we're actually doing all downstrokes, which is kind of weird, but actually kind of a common rhythm that you might encounter. It sounds like this. Down, 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 down. All right, so you've got this pattern down, you've got these rhythmic exercises under your belt. Now it's time to see if we can actually put this pattern to good use on an actual Irish jig. And I want to teach you the one that I've been playing throughout this video. This is a fun old tune called Father O' Flins. It's in the key of D major and goes something like this. So let's break this tune down into bite-sized phrases and learn it bit by bit. And if you'd like the transcription to follow along with at your own pace, you can grab it over on my Patreon page at the link in the cards above. But we'll have the same transcription here on screen as we go through the video. And first up, you'll notice that this tune has a really standard form, right? 8-measure A section with a repeat and an 8-measure B section that repeats as well. And I've got some suggested chords that you could use for the melody written above the transcription if you want to check those out. But we're going to focus on the melody here, starting with this first phrase. The nice thing about this A section is that it's pretty much all 8th notes, so you can just stick to the pattern without having to worry about too many different rhythms. But a weird thing here is that we have an 8th note pickup before the beginning of that first measure. We want to make sure to play that with a downstroke before restarting the whole pattern on the next measure there. So the pick directions there at the beginning would be down, down. Here's the next phrase. There's a bit of string crossing here between the A and the E strings, but make sure to keep the pattern going, right? The next phrase is actually the exact same as the beginning, so you've already got this. And just one more phrase here at the end. So we just got down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down. Try that with me. All right, let's put all those phrases together and see if we can play through this A section once together here. All right, halfway there, let's see if we can tackle the first phrase of this B section now. Again, we kind of have a pickup note here at the very end of the second ending on that A section. It's your open E string. We're just going to do a downstroke there, leading into the downbeat of the first full measure. Try this with me. So here's the second phrase, and this one is a little twisty, so watch out. Couple things to watch out for. We're playing a G sharp here on the 6th fret of our D string in this phrase. We're also playing the 3rd fret on the A string, which is a C natural. Both of those notes don't fit within the key of D, but they sound pretty cool in context with this melody here. Try this with me. Phrase 3 is a lot easier here. Just watch out for this longer quarter note on your open D, followed by a quick 8th note on the open A at the end of the phrase, leading us into the next phrase. But let's try this one together first. And here's that last phrase, which you might find a bit familiar. Try that with me. All right, same thing with this B section. Let's put all those phrases together and see what this thing sounds like once through. Pretty tricky, I know, right? And if you're still having trouble and you're going back to the alternate picking where you shouldn't be, see if you can stop here and sort out the issue before moving on, because I try to think about the pick strokes here as being just as important as the notes themselves. So if you're playing a wrong pick stroke, we're kind of playing the song wrong, so to speak. It's not going to have the same effect as if we play it with the right pick stroke. I want to make sure that you're building up good habits too. So see if you can go iron out any of those difficulties, and whenever you're ready, let's come back and see if we can play through the whole tune together. Both A's, both B's. Let's give it a shot. Awesome, well, you're well on your way to getting your Irish jig on here, but this is just really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this technique. And here at the end of the video, I want to give you a couple of extra ideas to press deeper into this picking pattern to help you feel more comfortable with it and to give yourself more expressive capability with it. And first, let's talk about this idea of emphasis again. Now, we've already talked about how we usually emphasize the stronger beats in the measure, right? And in 6/8 time, those stronger beats happen on the first note and on the fourth note, right? And just to get even more used to where those notes are, here's a funny exercise. See if you can overemphasize any notes in a tune that happen on those beats. So with Father O'Flynn, it might sound something like this. It doesn't actually sound that nice, and I don't recommend performing the tune like this in a public setting, but an exercise like this can really help give us more spatial awareness about where those beats are in the measure. But we want to have a little bit more control over where we put this emphasis. So the next step would be to see if you can take one of those emphasized beats away and maybe just emphasize the first beat of the measure. It would sound like this. So that's already giving us some options, right? But let's see if we can try the opposite, where we don't emphasize the first note, but we emphasize the fourth note in the measure. This one's a lot more challenging, but in some ways it's a lot more useful because for some reason a lot of Irish players end up naturally emphasizing that fourth note in the measure. It just starts to sound a lot more swingy or a little bit more lilting. Just sounds a little bit more natural, I guess. But if we leave no stone unturned here, there's actually two other places where we have downstrokes in this pattern that we could also use for emphasis, and these are a lot more challenging. So we have a downstroke on the third note in the measure and also on the sixth note in the measure. So let's see if we can emphasize both of those. But that right there is money. It's starting to sound even more Irishy now. If you wanted to, you could go and see if you could just emphasize the third note in the measure and just emphasize the sixth note of the measure too. But once you've done all that, you can start to mix and match these different emphases and to start painting your own picture of what this tune might sound like. And there's so many possibilities, but you might end up with something like this. All right, and one more idea for further exploration on this pattern, and this one's a bit of a doozy, is that some people adopt a different pattern altogether. Down, up, down might be the most common jig picking pattern for mandolin players out there, but there are folks like Dan Beamborn, who's a longtime Mandolin Cafe alum and amazing mandolin player who specializes in Celtic music here in the UK. He does down, down, up, down, down, up. So it's basically just changing where the two downstrokes happen. Instead of doing down, up, down, you're doing down, down, up, down, down, up. That's kind of a mouthful, isn't it? It's something I've heard other Celtic players use as well, but it's something I'm not quite as comfortable playing myself just because I'm so used to that other pattern. But if you want to explore all the possibilities, that's something that might be worth checking out. Relearning tunes with new picking patterns. That sounds kind of awful, doesn't it? But honestly, this is where the fun just starts because we haven't even talked about melodic embellishment. And that's one of the biggest parts about the Irish music tradition, and one of the biggest embellishment in Irish tradition is the Irish triplet, and it involves throwing in an extra pick stroke into our already complex and frustrating picking pattern here. So if you want to dive even deeper into this concept, check out the follow-up lesson that should be coming out shortly, where I'll show you how to play these triplets in every part of the 6/8 measure and get back on track with our jig picking pattern. Should be up here on screen shortly if it's not already, so check that out and some of the other videos here on the channel. Thanks so much for the subscribes and for the likes, and I'll see you in the next one real soon. Oh, jigs will really take it out of you, don't they? Gotta go drink some whiskey or something.